Good day, Megan. How the heck are you today?
I am doing wonderful. How are you, Rylan?
I'm swell, thank you. So let's dive right into this because I don't do like a formal introduction. I just let the person tell the audience who they are, and so I'd like to hear it right from you. Why don't you tell people who you are and how you got to do what you're doing today?
So I'm Megan Grimord. I am a nutrition and fitness coach. I do online coaching. I am also a mom to a wild and crazy 23-month-old girl, wife, dog mom, and just, I don't know, just busy woman in general. For me, how I got started in this is, I think like a lot of other trainers and coaches, is it started with me, right? Like I was kind of sick of how I felt in my head, my body, and I wanted to start making some changes. And when I started to learn more about things like macro tracking and starting to repair my personal relationship with food, I just felt really inspired because I knew a lot of women, and I've connected with a lot of women over social media who I know are just constantly in their own head about their progress and their relationship with food and their relationship with their body. So started getting educated more in the nutrition and fitness space and started coaching in 2021. It's progressed a long way from where I started. And now I do primarily work with women who do have disordered eating pasts, people who just have food relationships that they need to heal, and then really target behavior change. Yes, there's fat loss involved. Yes, there's awesome strength gains involved, which is incredible. But mostly my goal is to make sure that the people that I do work with feel incredibly confident in the choices that they make every single day.
That's beautiful. That's really the most difficult thing to get to, is to feel confident in the direction. But that's why you get a coach, right? Because it's like, should I be doing this? And the coach helps guide you to the certainty, and then in time it feels valuable. But there's so much uncertainty out there, so that's what the coach can give you that guidance for. Let's talk about the uncertain times, because I'm always really excited to know someone's evolution in this, and it's important to talk as openly or as you're willing to about some of the eating issues that you had in the past. Because when you hear someone else's trials and tribulations, there's some really important lessons that can be had, and people can appreciate that you came from possibly something similar. So why don't you take us on your own kind of fitness journey and talk about the more difficult times and how that evolved?
Yeah, I'm going to start with something that I hear so many women say, and what makes people really resonate is I grew up in a household where my parents, and my mom specifically, was always on a diet, right? Always on the next fad diet, always trying to lose those next 10 pounds. And really the only time I heard her talk about her body was when she was tearing it down. And I think a lot of women can relate to that. That's just kind of how we have talked about our bodies. And it's really exciting to see that shift changing in this day and age. And it makes me really, really hopeful for my daughter and her generation. But that's where it started for me. Like, I can remember in middle school, high school, just overthinking food and overthinking, is this going to make me gain weight? And naturally, I was a heftier kid. I was not athletic. The fact that I'm a trainer now would make a lot of people laugh. But I was always like, okay, well, how do I lose this weight? And that really spiraled into just really disordered thoughts about food. Everything was either good or bad. It was either making me fat or making me skinny. And it really got to a point in high school where I would have extreme restriction phases where I straight up wouldn't eat at lunch. I would sit at the lunch table with everyone else, and then I would go into weekend binges. And around the age of 14 is the first time I made myself purge from a binge. So I had some binging and purging past tendencies. Never got to the point where I would say it was like an extreme bulimia situation. It was occasionally after like a really big binge, but it's something that followed me into my 20s. And I found myself in 2020 getting married to a man that I loved, and I was still dealing and battling with a lot of these horrible habits and thoughts around food, and we were talking about potentially starting a family, and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. I can't bring this secret, these feelings into this marriage and into this family. It has to stop here. And that's really when I dug down deep into macro tracking. Prior to the wedding, probably a year or two before was when I started learning more about it. I was in an app. I had a coach, a free app, and I was one of those people who was too embarrassed to ever respond to the messages that they sent me. I never uploaded any of my progress photos. I never wanted to be 100% accountable to anything. And so, but 2020 was the year that it was like, no, I'm done. I know what I need to do. I need to dive deep. I need to be real with myself every day, and I have to just start getting the data, and I have to start looking at it as data instead of pass or fail. And from there, that's kind of where things took off for me. Like once I started to shift that mindset of like, this is data, that's where the mental shift started happening. And, you know, we're still learning and growing every day and breaking down some of those bad habits. And especially in the postpartum setting, sleep deprivation has brought up a lot of new challenges and old habits popping up that I've had to readdress. But I can say like, it's that evolution of changing that thought around food that really changed things for me and allowed not only me to heal mentally, but like it's the best shape I've ever been in my life. And I had a kid. So
that's really cool. That's amazing. That's an amazing kind of result from that big evolution. To go through it inherently tends to be one of the hardest things for women to get the weight off or keep the weight off, and you're on the other side of it in a more positive situation. That's amazing. And to hear the struggles is super valuable. I came from being a heftier kid as well, and I do believe that has a high probability, everything's probability, not guarantee, that you can develop a poor relationship with foods. You can develop a massive insecurity with yourself and hesitant, and so many choices are around food. So I immediately remember hiding pop and chips from my parents so I could sneak it away. And then I also remember in grade 6 trying to do ab tapes and trying to do something. Like it's ridiculous that it was already in my mind. And you know, I didn't even realize my mom wasn't always on a diet, but always kind of like into the fitness stuff, and like it was a discussion there in our family. But it's definitely that cultural thing that it'd be different if they had all the healthy habits figured out. They weren't jumping onto thing to thing. But it's another thing if they're, you know, like they're showing you, okay, do the fitness thing, but then it's not sustainable, right? And yep. So when you evolve yourself with this idea of the binge and purge at a very young age, that like there's clean or there's not clean, like that really evolves in a negative context. And at a young age, for you to be involved in that and for you to not go fully into bulimia is actually quite impressive. And I think it's on a spectrum too, right? Because the full diagnosable DSM kind of standard, it has to be so pervasive for so long, but we can fall on that spectrum without actually necessarily completely fit that diagnosis. And so for you to be able to pull yourself out of that is huge. I'm really curious about that moment or how that kind of goes, because was it, I always feel people have this aha moment, and I've had so many coaches on here that have that big transformation, and something makes us shift that gear, like I'm gonna go. And before, it's like you sit in that contemplation phase, or you kind of go in and out, and you even spoke highly about data, which I think is very powerful. But what made you shift gears to really dive into it in that way?
I think for all of us, like you have to, you end up in this moment where you either decide you are going to continue to be uncomfortable in a negative headspace, or you're going to start getting uncomfortable in a positive headspace, right? So it's discomfort either way. You're not comfortable in how your mind or how your body is looking right now, but it's uncomfortable to learn a new habit and to try and break down those things and realize that you may fail along the way. You absolutely might. And it is that moment of like, so I'm either going to feel that level of discomfort while I am chasing this positive space, or I'm going to remain staying uncomfortable in this really negative space. And that's going to be the trajectory for my life from that point on, right? Like, it's either going to be negative or positive discomfort. And I briefly mentioned it, but it, like, for me, it truly was like, I was getting ready for my wedding, and a couple weeks prior was the last time I had a big binge, and a purge incident. And I'm sitting there and I'm like getting ready to go down with all of my bridesmaids and get ready. And I was like, it's done. It has to be done, because I'm about to commit to forever to these other people in my life and this family that I'm trying to build. And regardless of if my daughter would have, even if it was a son, regardless if my children had ever actually witnessed me do a binge and restrict or a purge or something like that, it's still an action that I would be carrying with me, and it's still going to seep out into their lives in some way, because action and behavior just is always so much more relevant to the people in our lives, whether we know it right away or it's like in the back of our subconscious. And it's that aha moment. It's like connecting all the dots. Like, yeah, that is what was going on in my household for a really long time. And I've always been a studious person too. So when it came down to switching it to the data side of things, it's like, well, I can understand this. Like, if I can look at this and I can actually put the puzzle pieces together, and I know that, you know, X and Y, when you add them together, gives you this, I can figure it out. I can figure it out. And I think for me that really clicked, and it was just all around, like, I just have to get the right education to make the tools work. And I think that's most of us. Like, we aren't taught. Like, there's nothing in school or for most people in our homes, because most people don't have fitness coaches as parents, right? Or parents that are willing to work with a legitimate one for this is the amount of time that it requires to learn these skills. You have to get the right education from it to move it forward, and you have to be willing to get that. So that was kind of my aha moment, was more like, it's just education at this point. It's no different than doing any other homework that we've done throughout our lives. It's just with food.
Right. The education's the powerful thing. And anyone who's really into calorie tracking, macro tracking, they use that same language all the time. It's just like, hey, this is just information. This is how many calories it is. And there's more than calories. There's micronutrients. It's how it feels, how it digests, how you enjoy it. There is more to it. And there always ends up being this almost dichotomous perspective of calorie tracking that is just about that one hard number. And it's not that. It's a part of the whole education, right? And so I feel like that's where people really do get afraid of it. But as you mentioned about just numbers and being more objective, well, it takes the emotions out of it to a bit of a beneficial extent, because we are so emotionally driven around food. And this is where intuitive eating will not really serve us, because your intuition leads you to binge eating. It leads you to emotional eating. It leads you to just be in your feelings, because your feelings are your intuition. So later on, once you educate yourself on, hey, this is how 400 calories feels with 50 grams of protein. And then some days you're going to have 400 calories with 20 grams of protein. Train what that intuition is telling you, right? And maybe even using the term intuition doesn't always help, because it gives you this kind of spiritual kind of perspective and kind of almost a right to it, thinking that we have some sort of a extra level of intelligence that we should be able to rely on. And when it comes to food, we just fucking don't, because food's not the same anymore. We have been hijacked. We are being overloaded with our taste buds. I always use this analogy for people when you think about like just the food evolution, right? So let's use this example. Megan, what is like one of your favorite really tasty foods? Something that you fucking have a hard time putting down? It's
ice cream. Like it's hands down ice cream.
Ice cream.
Sometimes it doesn't even matter the flavor, right? Like
perfect. What's your flavor? I'm curious the flavor.
Oh, what is my flavor? Gosh, anything with cinnamon in it.
Ooh, I haven't had many cinnamon ice creams. That sounds nice.
It's wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, rate that on a scale from 1 to 10 for me. Is that a 10?
That's a 10.
10 out of 10. Food pleasure, right? So let's say food pleasure, that's a 10. What would you rate an apple on a scale from 1 to 10 for food pleasure on the same grading scale? Like you're comparing an ice cream's a 10. Where's an apple on that scale?
I'm going to give it a 5.
5. Totally fair. On a normal distribution, it should be right in the middle, right?
Yep.
Okay. Go back, say 1,000 years. Someone hands you an apple. I don't think you're rating it a 5 out of 10. I think an apple is a fucking cherished thing to someone 1,000 years ago. And so we now consider this boring as shit, when before it was, my God, where did you find this incredible creation? And so now we're expected to believe that intuition is going to guide us there. Now that's bullshit, right? So you've taken the data. Now what I'm curious about, how did you, you had the aha moment, which is big. Where was your mindset before? Because when you hear people talk about macro tracking, calorie tracking, like I fell into it pretty young, so I had a good sense that it worked. I didn't know how powerful and consistent it was until many years of doing it, but I also still looked at whole food and all that stuff. I wasn't so resistant to it though, because at a young age it worked for me. What made it more resistant for you to finally dive into it? And then how did that evolve?
Yeah, I think for me, it is the emotional part of it. It's that, I am going to have to track when I do go over on things, or if I do make the choice of having the ice cream instead of the apple, right? Like I have both in my house. I know logically that the apple is going to provide me more benefits, but the ice cream is delicious and I want that today. So I think that was the first step, was the emotional side of it, is I have to accept the choices that I'm making. I have to see that on paper. Okay. And being able to slowly separate that, first and foremost was understanding, I need to raise my calories because I'm not sticking to these lower calories, right? And I think we all kind of, when we start tracking macros, it's almost always in a deficit, which is the reverse of what I recommend now when I work with new people, is to put yourself into that deficit right away. But to raise my calories, reduce the guilt because I'm not sticking to these lower calories anyways, and actually just start to see, okay, what does happen when I work in the ice cream alongside the apple, alongside this or that, the other thing. And slowly over time, it started out with if it fits your macros, right? Okay, I'm trying to remove the guilt, so I'm just going to eat the things I want to eat. And then evolving into okay, now what is actually going to keep me full? How do I actually feel when I have a more well-rounded meal? What happens if I don't have dessert every single night? What if I don't work that in every day? Why does it have to be after dinner? What if I put it with my lunch? All of those different things, and just being able to, then it gets exciting to play with it, right? Yeah. It becomes more experimental of, okay, so now what? I experimented with what happens when I raise my calories. What happens when I do eat the ice cream on a more regular basis? And the experimentation starts to evolve into okay, but how can I feel my absolute best and still allow myself some of those emotional attachments? So that's kind of the evolution for me. It went from all emotion to logic plus emotion. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. And I'm glad that you're really speaking to this, because I haven't heard, I think it's Soji Fit, was on Jordan Syed's podcast, talked about emotional eating's good, but it's just how much you, and we can't take emotion out of food. That's not the point of it. But it's the idea of not be driven by it. It's actually fitting in. It's no different than emotions in general. People have the idea of stoicism and taking emotions out of it, and that's not even what stoicism is about. It's about not being driven by the emotions, recognizing the utility of the emotion in a given situation and when it doesn't serve you. And emotions can be the same in food. So there are times where let's be a little less emotional and have a healthy lunch, because, over the weekend I had a ton of ice cream. And so then later on, trying to fit it in maybe at supper and being a little less emotional rather than maximally emotional, right? So it's an understanding how you can govern your own emotions rather than being driven by them. So it makes complete sense. And I love how you're amplifying this, because when people are so afraid and hesitant with the calorie tracking, it's so hard to get them to understand that there is more comfort in the long haul. The hardest thing there is evolving it, as you mentioned, like, and experimenting how it fits for you. Experimentation is a really great terminology for people to use more with their fitness, because if you get caught in like you're gonna do the thing, it's like, no, it's continuous trial and error the rest of your life. Like, but you get so much better at trial and error, and you continue to make things more and more efficient. And this is why we say it's a journey, it's not a destination. And so currently where you're at, you're still on your journey, and your journey can actually just get a lot less rocky, and you can evolve this. I'm still changing my diet to this day. And I have so many, I actually go back to, oh yeah, I forgot this way of eating. This works too. I forgot this. And I continue to evolve it depending on the person I'm at. And the thing that I really hope more people can see within the calorie tracking and stuff like that, how that fits into the model of who they are. It's not that you have to do this rigid thing and you have to become someone new, but it's like, how do you bring out the best in you and fit in more healthy foods, fit in the things you enjoy, and how it overlaps, how data can allow you to be the fun part of you, but also a healthier version of you. And so it's a really hard thing when people have that wall. And you mentioned something really important there about you had to be accountable. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because I know in my binge eating history, as soon as I binged, there was no calorie tracking, even if I had a concept of it. And so there's something really important too when it comes to binge eating and emotional eating. The subconscious level of thinking is so quiet and powerful. Like, it's a voice without having a voice. It's deep inside your stomach and you don't know why. I had this conversation with one of my clients that was challenged with binge eating, and I said, because I was going through it very similar to him, but his was more powerful, and I asked him, do you think you could make a promise to yourself to not binge eat for a whole year? And he just got super uncomfortable. You know, he's literally fidgeting in his seat. And I'm like, right there, that's your subconscious level, your inner subconscious level of uncertainty that this is still like driving behind. That it's just like, logically, we'd be like, yeah, I'll just not binge eat for a year. But it is something they wouldn't let go of. So to me, the way that you're explaining this is like, oh, you know, if I have to calorie track, then I have to be accountable, then I might not binge. You literally almost don't want to let go of binging. That's a part of the thing. That's a part of the separation. And so when people have this idea of calorie tracking, you might just have to be more accountable. That's a discomfort for people to go through. What kind of advice do you have to give to people that are in a similar experience to yourself, that are uncertain of trying to evolve into the calorie tracking, that still have this hesitancy? How would you explain the process for them to make it feel a little less scary?
I think the first part is like, you know, it does have to be scary. Like, you have to be scared to start doing it, right? You're scared into this change. But I think the other side of it is, number one, like, when you do start to have more accountability, or you at least allow yourself to be curious of like, what does this actually look like on paper? Sometimes you actually see that it's not as bad as you think. Like, sometimes you're telling yourself, I'm having this binge. Well, first and foremost, most of the time when I experience this with clients, it's, you think that you're binging, but it's more that your calories are just so incredibly low that you're bringing yourself to maintenance. And it's not like, it's not this huge, it's not as big of a thing as they think that it is. And that was for me too. You know, I would be like, you know, I'd start eating lunch, and then lunch turns into a candy bar, and then it turns into the chips, and then it turns into like this spiral, because you've been restricting so hard for so long. But then when you actually put it down on paper, it's like, well, it actually wasn't as bad as I thought. So then it stops the spiraling of it into other parts of the day, other parts of the week, etc. Or it also allows you to take a minute to be like, okay, if I am going to go eat this thing now, like, now I'm going to make myself pause, and I'm going to actually measure out a portion of it. Regardless of if I go back or not for more of it, at least I'm getting more familiar with the portion size of it, and you're getting a little bit more educated along the way. And then soon, like, you kind of just start to see some of these things of like, okay, it's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. Now, if you're doing it on your own, it's a little bit harder. But if you're working with a coach, at least now you have talking points with your coach. And then your coach can start to dissect, okay, well, how did we get here? What sort of state were we in? And then finding comfort. And this is the other thing that I tell people is like, I want to find an alternative for you than food all of the time for whatever it is that you're experiencing. And let's actually work on finding out, like, why is this the one thing that we're seeking comfort for? Or why is this our automatic reaction to stress? Why is this our automatic reaction to overstimulation? And what other tools are you and I going to build together to stop that and allow you to break some of that? And I think giving them that hope of like, okay, I'm going to find something else though. Like, I'm going to actually find relief. And I think some of that is too for people. It's like, how am I going to cope with all of these other things in my life if I don't have this food anymore? This is how I cope with it. This is what makes me feel better. What is going to make me feel better? And giving them hope that there are other ways to feel better and to, you know, accept the emotion and just deal with it in a more productive manner. So I think that's part of it too, is offering them that hope that there is going to be a different solution. It's not just cut and dry this.
Right. Yeah. Because that's where that subconscious level of thinking is going to take over and not want to do it, is going to be resistant. You hit something very key on the head, is like, you got to understand why you're doing what you're doing, because it's not the fact that you're hungry, right? So if food isn't the problem, how is food your solution? And it's because it's going to be this temporary masking of emotion by giving you a dopamine hit, because it's one of the fastest. Like, outside of, like, I'm not suggesting it's smoking crack. It's one of the fastest way for someone to go from one emotion to the next. And that's why people compare it to drugs, right? Except the challenge is we always got to eat and we always got to be around these foods, right? So the thing that I think more people need to understand is that, first off, just admit that it's a cope. Admit that it's like, hey, you're coping with something. Now, there are other reasons for us to be okay with emotional eating, but this probably won't actually be the way you want to handle the situation all the time. And if it's going to be there after, you're going to feel that overwhelm, that stress and everything anyways. Why don't we figure out, as you mentioned, a new way to handle it? And sometimes people are just afraid for emotion to sit there. And it's been a huge lesson for me personally that processing emotion is literally just being okay with feeling it. So processing with stress, overwhelm, anxiety, whatever, like, and obviously there's a spectrum on some of these things. People need to handle it a different way, but sometimes just sitting with the emotion and letting it be there, it fades away, because your body and your mind actually are trying to signal to you, I'm uncomfortable with something. And then maybe your mind starts to actually figure out what that problem needs to be solved. That's where going for a walk can help. Start to think about what that problem is. Maybe it's an organizational thing. Maybe you just have to get a good night's rest and not stay up and eat, which will actually ruin your sleep and then manifest that problem the next day. And you hit on a couple other really big points there. I totally agree that when it comes to, like you mentioned, people think that they're doing really bad on these binges. The big issue with that in the yo-yo cycle is that it's more of an issue that your calories are so low during the week. And it's usually during the week, commonly. I always say you have a micro, meso, and macro yo-yo dieters. So people will, micro would be day to day, right? So the yo-yo in a day is barely eating, binging at night. More commonly, I would imagine a lot of people are, really restricting during the week. And that's when they're doing all the training, by the way. So they might be doing more cardio, HIIT training. Maybe they're even doing strength training, but they're barely eating, not willing to track calories. And we're always saying eat less, move more, right? So then if I'm feeling a little starved during the week, I'm on the right track. And so then you get to the weekend, you're exhausted, you're depleted, but you put in your workouts, you put in your hard dieting, and now it's Saturday and Sunday, so you're binge eating, I don't feel like tracking, and I'm sure as shit not feeling like moving because I'm exhausted from all week. So what you've actually created is an atmosphere for your body to not build any muscle, actually atrophy more, because of the restriction to calories. So even though it's strength training, it's insufficient for how low your calories are. Then you bring them back up. And it's not like it's crazy, but it's enough to make that a net balance by the end of the week. And so as you mentioned, great advice of like the first thing you should do is probably start eating a little bit more, even if it's for 2 to 3 weeks. Just give yourself, whoa, hey, this is maintenance calories of whole food. This is actually really filling. I'm supposed to eat this much food? How many times do you sign someone up and you say, are you sure I'm supposed to eat this much food? This is actually going to help me lose weight? 90% of clients do that, right? And I think that goes into the thing with like, it's not always needed, but I heavily encourage, it doesn't have to be a coach, but someone should help you. Because clearing up that information, it could be someone else that you know, that you trust, that's been through something, that's doing it in a healthy way. But at the end of the day, accountability is big, because you got to trust in the system and you have to want to show up and do it all the time. But I think this is really great advice. I would love to pivot quickly on this kind of advice around mothers, because this is, you know, the big transformation that you've had to evolve in, and it's been your best. So this is the really cool story. Let's hit off, just off the bat, the best advice you have for mothers to help prioritize themselves.
This one is like, this is a loaded question, because I always say the greatest thing I ever did, not just for my family, but for my business, was become a mom. Because I can say it till the cows come home that I understand you're busy. I understand this. I understand that your kids keep you up at night. But until you experience that, you don't. You don't understand. The best advice that I can give to a new mom, just like very generic, without knowing anything about them or what they're going through, is you need to allow yourself grace. Like, you need to allow yourself grace in flexibility of how you move, in flexibility of how your meal planning looks now, in flexibility of sleep. I went for myself postpartum. I ended up in a really unique situation where my husband got very sick when I came home with my daughter. And for the first 2 weeks, I was parenting alone because he couldn't be around her. I had a C-section too, so I'm healing from surgery. My daughter was 4 weeks early, so she was only 4 pounds. So if you are a woman, you know, like when your baby's that small, you have to feed them every 2 hours. So whether that's formula or breast milk, like, you are up feeding that child every 2 hours, which also then developed into insomnia after the fact. So I had this big picture of what my life was going to look like as a mom and how I was going to recover from it. And life was like, good joke, girlfriend. And I think that's a really common thing for women, is like, you go into this and you do have a plan, and like, you watch all of the moms on Instagram and you're like, okay, I can do this. Like, it's going to be okay. And then your circumstance might be completely different than everything else that you're seeing online. So you have to be able to understand, like, this is my circumstance. This is where I am. And I need to give myself grace here, which I did not, which, again, postpartum depression also is a whole other slew of things that can play games with you. And it is very much so taking out of, like, it might be a time where you aren't worried about tracking your food, and you are just very more so diligent about asking for help. And that's my other thing. Maybe you don't have to ask for help, but you need to let those around you know you need and appreciate their help, because they can't read your mind. They cannot. They want to help you, and there's so much that they can't do to help you, because your husband cannot, like, if you're breastfeeding, your husband can't do it, right? Like, he's useless nipples. But you know, he can help by making sure there are meals in the kitchen for you, that he can help, you know, even if he's going back to work and you're home alone, can he portion out some meals? So all you have to do when you do get that second of getting that baby down, go heat it up in the microwave. Can he do that for you for the day? Like, those small things. So the grace and accepting and vocalizing help is appreciated in any micro way that you can get it.
That's very great advice. And I don't hear people say this enough or appreciate this enough when it comes to, you know, busy parents. It's just like trying to ask for help, right? I think this is where I don't see this discussion enough. where it should be really amplified, whether it's a mother for sure or a father. It's just like, you have a partner, you're a team in this effort, right? And they always say it takes a village to raise a child. Getting support in this in any way is going to help, right? And trying to do it, and of course you're going to try to be the super mom. Absolutely. You're going to do everything you can. But if that ends up draining the tank, like, what if you're not invincible? And you probably aren't, right? So it's going to only make it harder on the child in the end. And having that, agreement with your partner, hey, can you help me out with this or this? And it's just going to make it a team effort in any way that you can. And I totally respect that the grace has to be a part of it, because it's just going to be an imperfect picture. You had said something very powerful there that I talked to a mother recently about, just like, go in with any plan and it's probably not going to work out. Like, that's just, parenting in general. Like you mentioned, all that chaos that happens. It's like, you can try and go and be prepared, but be ready to accept absolutely anything that gets thrown your way. And I think that's really helpful advice, especially for those who are preparing or people who have gone through it. Because if you're preparing, it's like, well, prepare for the worst and it's still going to be worse. And so you go in a little bit more aware that you're just going to be naive in this, and then just do your best to be courageous in that moment. And then for mothers who have been through it, and it's like, man, it was chaos. I just couldn't do anything after. It's like, yeah, that's okay. That's okay too. That's okay that it isn't perfect. So as you're evolving now in your motherhood, I'm curious about that evolution, because, now that your kid's growing and you're trying to get into the groove of all that, what's some good sustainability habits getting back into the groove? Or because especially, you had said it so well, I always try to get mothers to speak to it. I don't have kids yet. I can't speak to it. And you mentioned, like, I cannot tell you what it's like. I don't even say the words I understand. I always say I respect and appreciate where they come from. But I always want mothers to speak to it, because it helps me way more be able to translate, because I'll reference you. Hey, I talked to a mother and this is what she said. So I want to know from your perspective, how do women get back to prioritizing themselves the right amount and getting back into their habits?
Yeah. I think for mothers in general, like getting back into, this is also getting back into it, assuming you had any semblance of it before, right? Or how do I get started? Like, where do I start? I want you to start with one thing. I want you to pick one thing, and I want you to master the heck out of it. And I want it to be a part of your life. And then we can add something else, because when you are, especially if you are a new mom, which is what I am. Like, I still call myself a new mom. I am learning every single dang day. That, you don't know what to expect. So trying to load too many things on your plate at once is going to just defeat the heck out of you in a season that is already sometimes incredibly defeating, because you don't know. Like, this tiny human can't talk to you. You don't know what's happening. So pick one thing. So if it is like, for a lot of women, I start with movement, because it is the one thing that gives them space for themselves in a lot of instances, or at least gives them space to not be 100% attached to their baby. So if you don't have the opportunity to have childcare, and you need your baby to be next to you, it at least allows you to, like, put them in the bouncy chair, put them on a blanket, and take a couple of moments for yourself. If you end up having to pick them up, like, it's fine. So yeah, we're going to start with movement. We're going to start with, basics, walking, breath work for women, TVA connection, starting to heal that core, gradually progressing that, and being okay. Like, it's not a rush. The goal here is to connect with your body again in a way that feels good to you. It's about feeling strong again. It's about feeling confident again. It's not about a weight, a number, and anything like that. Like, that is what it's going to be when you're focusing on movement, is let me figure out this new body, because it is different. There are parts of you that are never going to go back, whether you like it or not. And not that you can't look phenomenal, because I feel very confident in my body now. But there are things like, my hips are a different shape now. That's just what they are. And I can't do anything about that. So, pick the one thing, whether it's movement. If it's easier for you to do nutrition, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that I at least have 3 meals with at least 30 grams of protein every day to make sure that I am fueled to take care of this human. Cool. That's what we're going to focus on. And then once that just feels like you're part of your routine, then let's move on to either tweaking that to make it a little bit more advanced towards your overall end goal, or let's add the next thing that's going to amplify it towards your end goal.
I couldn't agree more that it has to be simple and it has to be consistent. And I always feel like this is a big issue with, all or nothing people, is they want to do it all. They want to be across the board. And then it's, immediate failure. And again, even the term failure is inappropriate because it's experimentation. But the all or nothing just feels better and effective, but it's super ineffective. I always give people the analogy of if you're driving a car, 60 miles per hour down a road, okay, all or nothing is do a 180. Well, you're going to fucking roll, right? Like, it's just not going to work.
Yes.
And then whereas if you take that wheel at 60 miles per hour, which is how fast life's going, turn that 10 degrees. You'll feel a lean, but you can do a full 180 over the course of many weeks. And so don't think that that's not change. Change is change. And it's always a matter of find just a little bit of discomfort, right? Enough discomfort that's noticeable, but not that you couldn't realistically sustain that for the next 30 days. And that's like, it has to be that kind of tangibility where that one thing repeated, then it becomes you. Now, it sounds on paper so much easier said than done, but it's, again, just see it as an experiment. I think that language is something that could help a lot more people, is like, don't even worry if that one thing didn't pan out as much as you are willing to try the one thing. You're willing to, that 30 grams of protein, that'll probably be hard for people for more than 30 days. And so it's like, attempt it. Don't worry about pass or fail. It's attempts and how you can change that attempt, how you can change this attempt. And I think that can evolve so much over time. And I think that's really helpful advice, that people get that clear notion of like, just tackle this one major thing. What are some other major things, whether it's from moms or clients that you work with routinely, that you feel like, okay, this conversation comes up pretty routinely, and I just wish more people knew about it?
Conversation that comes up pretty frequently. Like we've touched on kind of a lot of it. I think the biggest thing that I wish more people understood is sometimes less really is more in a lot of these situations. And it can be from the standpoint of your movement. It can be from the standpoint of what we're doing with nutrition. It's not a race. None of it's a race. And I think with moms specifically, there's this other caveat of like, there isn't a ton of control over how things change or how things are after birth, right? Like with just weight gain in general, along the way, there is some semblance of control, right? Like there are things that you are actively doing that are causing this weight gain. A human grew in you. Like you didn't have control. Like you didn't decide where you were going to like add weight because of that, or like nausea, or all of the other things and all those other things. So there's this like other mental caveat of like, okay, but like this is where I was and this is where I am. And I had, and in some cases it was some control, right? But like I didn't have a ton of control over this outcome came to be. So now it's like this, I just want to feel like this person again. But we can't get there as fast as we once could, because now there's this other human involved. And just being okay with less being more. You don't have to be in the gym 5 days a week. You don't. You can, let's do 3, let's do 2, let's get there. Like, let's just do the small thing first. You don't have to be in calorie deficit immediately. You don't have to lose the fat immediately. Let's find the routine again. Like, let's just start there. Like, less is almost always more. In almost every case, for most people, less is more, because when we do, like we were just talking about it, the more you pile on, the worse it gets, and the more procrastination sets in, and the bigger gloom and doom of the I'm never going to get there because there's all of it. No, like less is more. I don't care what anyone says. I'll argue it with anyone. Like, it is like, yes, you can take the fast track, but in my personal experience and in coaching hundreds of people at this point, it doesn't always pan out. And I can even say it from a perspective of motherhood. Like, when I was dealing with my postpartum depression, like, there was just this nagging part of me that was like, you have to do it tired, you have to do it exhausted if you have to, because these are the things that made you happy prior to being a mom. This is the routine that made you most fulfilled prior to being a mom. And it drove me to a point of utter exhaustion where at the beginning of this year, like, that's when my binging started again. And I had to reprogram my brain in all of these new ways and how I was dealing with different aspects of motherhood, because I didn't allow myself the less is more approach. I didn't. And then I got to be this lovely example for my clients of like, this is why I don't coach you like this, because then you end up in a hot mess like me. Like, it just, and again, I guess, I'm still learning. Less is more.
Yeah. It's, again, one of these things that we just have, again, intuitively thinking, oh, more is more. That's the intuition, right? That's why, by the way, fasting is just the newest term for fucking anorexia and bulimia, as far as I'm considered, for 90% of the people. I'll say that there is the small amount of people who are using it for religious purposes or mental health purposes, but if you tell me you're fasting for the sake of weight loss in any way, you're on eating disorder, right? Like, it's just literally an extreme behavior because it makes you feel like it. Literally, I've had clients say, yeah, just to kind of punish myself. That's a horrible instinct. You don't need to punish yourself when you make mistakes. You need to be, analytical of the mistakes you make. And more on your whole, adage there. I think it's so helpful for people to say less is more. It's the 80-20 principle, Pareto's principle, that 80% of your results will come from 20% of your perceived efforts. So you got a whole workout. You got your squat, you got your leg extensions, your lunges, your hamstring curls, and maybe your glute kickbacks. 80% of your results came from your squats. Go home. Like, that's good. You're good for the day. It's a multi-joint exercise. Wow, you actually just banged out 20 minutes and you didn't have to spend the whole hour and you got most of your results. Isn't that what you actually need in motherhood or in life? Anyone need, right? You want to look at the 80-20 principle in your health. Okay, well, maybe you don't want to track calories right now, but if every time you ate 30 grams of protein, you are more satiated. Again, let's knock out what matters more in that instance. And you don't have to tackle everything. And as you mentioned, you yourself are still evolving as a coach, as a mom, and you will always evolve. We will always personally evolve. In the moment as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not the mother, but I would hope every human would imagine the moment you become a mother, your biology is different and your life is different. The circumstances can never be compared the same. Guaranteed, everything is different. So now you don't have to really put the expectation of who you were. I don't think you just should, because now not only is your biology different, who you are as a person has to be different because you have another human being that relies on you. So any other tactic that works in the past probably can't work at the same pace or rate. And so you have to now evolve as the person you want to be, and like in fitness and nutrition, and as a mother. So it just can't be the same. So I think that's really good advice. I think it's really helpful. You also had, I want to hit on this piece of content you had. It was great. Harsh fitness realities. Okay, I'm just doing the Jordan Sayed thing here. So let's go into this really quick because this was a fun one. You don't feel like crap because of lack of water. You don't feel like crap because you didn't hit too many boot camps. You don't feel like crap because of too high cortisol. Let's dive into these. Why is this not the problem for people?
It's not the problem because they haven't addressed the big reps yet. Like, that's what it always comes down to. The client who's asking me about water is also the client who hasn't hit their protein goal in 3 weeks. The client who's telling me they think their cortisol is high is also the client who stays up 3 hours too late every night. The client who is telling me that they're not getting the muscle growth that they want is also the client who is burning themselves to the ground. When we're asking about these smaller things and we haven't addressed the fact that like we still just aren't tracking food. Like we still aren't accountable to that.
Mm-hmm.
We still just haven't even been following the program for 4 weeks yet. Like these are all of the actual issues that are holding you back. That's what that post was about. And like, honestly, it's because you see all of these things online of like, you're not drinking enough water. Now you need electrolytes. Now you need this pill to bring down your cortisol, this magical cocktail. You come try this boot camp. And if you don't lose weight in 30 days, we'll give you your money back. So you go to all of the classes, right? And you just end up exhausted and depleted, and you still haven't addressed the core issue.
Oh, I think that's so well stated. Water is highly overrated for people. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely people who just don't bring a water bottle with them, and I think that usually solves most of the problem. Like I actually don't even tell people quantity. I'm like, bring a water bottle everywhere, sip it between each meal, before and after, and if your pee stinks, start drinking more. Like that's really fundamentally it. Because if your pee reeks, it's just super yellow, that's a problem. If it's clear, that's actually also a problem. So it's like, it doesn't have to be complicated, and it's not the biggest barrier to entry. It's not the reason why you're missing so many of these things. It's still a great habit to have, but it honestly isn't as high up on the hierarchy as some of these other things. As you mentioned, the cortisol, this is the new adage, is a new way to get people really hooked, is just talk about hormones. It's also like a wonderful, because it's like, it sounds, I want to say, because it's more scientific, more detailed, more individualized. It's more almost uncontrollable. So there's something wrong with you. That's why I haven't been able to get this. It's that's why feeling. That's why feeling. The secret, the thing. And I always go back to this. The thing I remember hearing when I first got to a gym, I heard one of the people talking about it, the 10 things in 10 secrets in fitness and nutrition fit people know that unfit people don't. Number one is there's no secrets. There's nothing waiting behind that door that's going to be much different. And when it comes to hormonal profile, it's the chicken or the egg. But I'm pretty sure that you're looking at the egg and assuming it's the chicken. It's like, I need to have better hormones. It's like, actually, if you eat healthy, you get enough sleep, you get enough training, guess what happens to your cortisol? Right? Every time you strength train, the cortisol goes up, right? And then it comes back down because you do it consistently. And I love that you like compared the person who's high stress and you immediately talks about sleep, because that's like probably one of the biggest contributors is that they're staying up late. And let's add in one other little thing, probably on social media, probably watching TV or doing something not necessary for their life. And so you can't tell me you don't have a means to control your cortisol a little bit. There are certainly some people who do have high cortisol, but you better be hitting every other thing on the head before you start talking about hormones. I think that's really good advice. Is there anything else you see on social media that really annoys you these days?
Oh, gosh. I hate the mom side of social media. I hate it.
Ooh, okay, let's go into, I've never heard said this. This is good. Let's go into this.
It is the most judgmental community that pretends to be uplifting that you will ever. It's like being gaslighted by every reel that you see, almost. Like it's awful. You post one thing and everybody has an opinion 7 ways from Sunday about it. But like, the biggest thing, like, I hate seeing the mom reels of like, this is why my toddler cried 7 times today and why I couldn't get anything done. And like, all you do is you highlight the negatives of motherhood. And like, you're supposed to laugh and be like, yeah, this is my life too. Instead of being like, okay, yeah, my toddler cried 7 times today, but like, I also got my ass to the gym, and then I came home and I drank some water, and then, I sat on the couch and I did watch 30 minutes of Netflix, but then I was an adult and I went to bed. Like, there's like all of this other nuance in it, where it's the mom who glorifies putting your toddler down and immediately raiding the pantry. Like, this is my me time, or immediately grabbing the glass of wine. This is how mommy relaxes, by continuing to make yourself feel not great. Like, and And we're just supposed to laugh and smile and be like, haha, yeah, me too. And then you say something on the opposite side of it and you get attacked. Or you post something in the middle, you get attacked. Like, everybody's mothering wrong. Everybody doesn't understand me. And then it becomes every post is about me and my life and my choices. But sometimes, like, it's not about you. It's not about you or your family. But maybe you need to reflect on why it's stinging you so hard.
That's interesting. So I'm going to have a different algorithm, but I haven't seen this algorithm. Yeah. So fundamentally, you're seeing more reels where the moms are, basically in some way, presenting how difficult it is to be a mom. And then in a humoristically way, being like, yeah, so that's why I do this. So that's why I do this. And almost in some way showing like, this is why I have this behavior, and in some way glorifying it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. And I mean, we see it in a lot of different aspects in fitness, nutrition. I'm sure you see different realms of that on your algorithm. But yeah, except you will then be attacked by a community that says, we need to support each other.
Yeah, I think that's when you mentioned kind of the mom, I think you could get, I've heard this from like the mom's culture. They can be very judgmental, and also at the same time without a nuanced perspective of like maybe like health and fitness and stuff like that. And I mean, there's like a real challenge there for moms for sure, and all parents is like, even though your kid's down, even though something's down, it's like the work's not over. Like, that's a really hard thing to admit. And then if you have that kind of sentiment, then it's like it's not showing enough empathy for the mom who wants to have a glass of wine. And so I can just see that being a very, really difficult culture to navigate. It just has to be difficult. And social media is just a really dangerous place now. Like it just is. And it's that's why. So I'm not sure, how often do you find yourself scrolling or, using social media for amusement or like anything like that?
It has been down drastically lately. I've been making a really conscious effort to not scroll as much, but I think, and maybe you experience this too as a coach, like it's also our medium of how we attract new clientele, totally. Being an online coach, because I don't work in a gym. I'm exclusively online. It's the way for me to connect and grow. So it's like this double-edged sword. And then on top of it, like if you don't engage enough, you also get punished by the algorithm for that, for not participating in being a part of the hamster wheel of Instagram, but also like, so it really is this double-edged sword. But when you get down one of those rabbit holes, it's really hard to get back out.
Yeah. I wonder too if that, I can't say I haven't been getting engagement just because of that, but I don't scroll Monday to like Friday night, usually Monday to Friday. Like I'm not allowed to scroll. And awesome. It's been the best mental health thing for me. It started a year ago. I called it No Scroll November, and I did no scrolling. And there was many times where it wouldn't even affect my life or work or anything. But it was like, I was bored and I would want to, but I didn't. And then when I went back into it, I realized how quickly it's like, oh, I'm staying up late. I'm getting into these rabbit holes, getting angry because you're listening to bullshit. Or just unnecessary rabbit holes. So now I see it no different than watching a movie. I'm not going to watch a movie until 2 hours into the night, keep me up till 12, and then actually it affects my emotional state even worse, right? So it's even higher risk throughout the week. I will occasionally see a feed post pop up. As you mentioned, we got to go on there. And then I've even done, when I did my Sober October challenge, I wasn't even allowed to watch that feed post. I was just like, nothing unless it's on the weekend. And then even then I confine it to 1 or 2 hours. And I said, okay, that's 2 hours. I'm not going to find out any new information. This is not going to help me. And so I really hope more people can start to treat social media like a drug, like alcohol, that if you were to have 2 to 3 glasses of wine a night, you'd be like, I think we should cut back. But if you're saying you have 1 glass of wine a night and it doesn't keep you up, doesn't disrupt your sleep, I'll be more okay with that. But maybe just have wine on the weekend. Maybe just have it on the weekend. Maybe just have it for amusement. But we need to start seeing how big of an inherent mental health risk it is, how big of a waste of time it is, because it really is such a dangerous tool. So I really value that perspective that you had on the mother's algorithm. I didn't even know that was such an issue, but I think you always got to caution yourself to that. What?
Yep.
Because you're living in a different world than me now, right? Because I live in a different world than you or my partner. Like, she has a different algorithm. I'm actually jealous for algorithm. It's just random shit, and I want more of that. I'm more caught up into all this either political bullshit or nutritional and fitness bullshit. So, but I love this. This is a great chat. I want to wrap up with one final thought. Now, you can go into work, life, anything or everything. What is your most recent ambition? What are you really excited about right now?
What am I really excited about? Well, you see this nice blank bookshelf behind me. We're moving. So we move the first week of December into what is going to be for hopefully, it's our friend. This is where we plan to really raise our daughters. So I am just very excited to be in this chapter of this is us. This is our moment as a family to really hunker down, put our roots in, grow community, include making that more inclusive to my clientele, my family, all of it. So we're just really in this big transition moment of becoming this new, evolving as a family, I guess is the best way to describe it. And I think anytime in my experience that something big personally like that has happened, whether it's I'm getting married, having my daughter, etc., it has only amplified good things in every other area of my life. So, new opportunity for growth. A little bit scary because new house means different financial obligations, right? And just really making sure that all of that stays in the line and that you push yourself to continue to grow to make those dreams and magic happen. So I'm excited to see what more grows out of just growing in that way.
That's great. That is super exciting part of life. Absolutely. Super excited for you. And this was a fun chat. I certainly will reach out to you again to do this again, because I would love to go really deep on the rabbit hole around emotional eating and binge eating even more. But I definitely wanted to touch on the motherhood stuff. So we're gonna dive deep again. We're gonna reach out in the future. We're gonna have to chat again. Why don't you let people know where they can find out more about you?
I am primarily on Instagram, so you can find me at Megan _ Grimord. So it's just my first and last name with an underscore in between. That's really all I try to be anywhere these days. You can find me on Facebook too, but you'll just see whatever I'm posting on Instagram translating over to Facebook.
Yeah, I do the same. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much, Megan. We'll reach out soon. Thanks so much to Megan for that wonderful conversation. I'm really looking forward to having her on again. I wanted to touch base on both the emotional eating stuff and on the motherhood stuff, but off air we even went really deep, even more on the emotional eating side of things, and we have a lot that we can talk about. So there's going to be more upcoming in the future for sure. And just to hit that on the head, let's dive into this just very quickly to remind you about emotional eating. It's okay to have it. It's okay to be a part of your life, but let's talk about how it doesn't have to drive your life. Let's try to understand how to manage it in your life. Everyone emotionally eats in some capacity, unless you're a sociopath. It's normal to feel emotions around food. You have cake, and that is a celebration, right? You are emotionally eating in that state. You're going out for dinner to celebrate a birthday. You're emotionally eating, and that's fine. It's when we're emotionally eating because we're trying to cover things up, and we don't just have, a half a chocolate bar. We have a couple, and we've also then decided to have ice cream. We're just sitting there in this state of trying to numb ourselves with food. That's a bit of a dangerous thing for emotional eating. And so in that moment, you got to remind yourself, emotions are not actually being solved by this food. Why am I doing this? And so go deeper. What started that moment? Go backtrack before it all happened. When was the moment that you felt that you needed to go eat it? Okay, so now let's ask yourself, what stresses in your life were leading you to that moment? What's going on in your day? Was it a tough day? Was there some reason that you felt like you specifically wanted that food and wanted to kind of mask from it? What were you not willing to sit with? Sitting with emotions you may or may not have heard me rant about this before, is probably one of the most underutilized tools to evolve someone's mental health. Now, this doesn't solve everyone's problem, but I think more commonly, people are not willing to sit with their thoughts. Now, there's many ways you can do this. Journaling is the number one way I recommend it to clients, but journaling is really just a meditative practice of being self-analytical and exploring what you're thinking and feeling. The analogy I always give is when people think about self-analysis of journaling or thinking with themselves, it feels scary and awkward and icky. But I always use this analogy of if you were to go and scuba dive in a lake, and here in Manitoba, we have very dark lakes, so you think there's going to be fucking creatures down there, but it's not. It's going to be a bunch of fish kind of swimming around. There's an incredible ecosystem. And by the way, that lake is you. There's an amazing ecosystem underneath you. There's amazing reasons that you've gone through trials and tribulations, and you might have an emotional coping strategy that you developed over years, and it was caused by something. Now, the cause doesn't matter as much as the effect, but it's important to recognize that there is certain stimulations in your life that are leading you to it. It's not, there's a bit of a debate of whether or not you need to know why you have an emotional eating issue, whether or not you need to go down and have a discussion with a therapist over it, or whether you just need to recognize that when this trigger happens, you eat. And so when you go through that evolution, it's like bringing a flashlight down to that lake and realizing that there's amazing things down there. And when you put pen to paper, maybe you type it out, maybe you just have a voice memo and you're talking to your phone, or maybe you go for a walk in the instant that you're feeling stress and just allow yourself to experience the emotion. Now, right there, that probably sounded pretty scary for some people. I'm supposed to just feel stressed? I'm supposed to just feel sad? Yeah, that's actually what emotions do. And I know it sounds crazy. I've told this on the podcast before, but I'm going to tell it again. The first time I gave myself that opportunity where I felt very stressed from what's going on with work, was not going good in the business, and my instinct was to smoke weed, and I knew smoking weed would get me into eating food, and I would just end up feeling worse. I just knew that was going to be the result, but I still had a huge craving for it. And so I sat at the end of the day with emotion, with just feeling the stress, and just felt it, processed it, like almost like you're not allowing the digestive process to happen in the stomach. Allow those emotions to sit in you and be like, okay, this is what it is. And so I gave myself the opportunity to not have this knee-jerk reaction, smoke weed, eat food, and then feel shittier tomorrow. I forced myself to say, okay, who do I want to be in this position? This is the stimulus I have of stress. And so I thought, okay, let's just try something new. My new experience was I'm going to go for a walk, go get some Diet Pop, and then try to get a good night's rest. And on that walk, continued to kind of feel my emotions and kind of sort through them. And I didn't feel as stressed after. And then later on, not only did I get a good night's rest and felt better the next day, but what was really interesting, the next time I had a trigger effect of a high stressful situation I couldn't control in my business, it felt very similar, but my urge was not to smoke weed. My urge, my instinct was to actually go for a walk, go do something physical. And it completely flipped. Now, this goes way back to an episode I had with Adele Spragon in her book, The Shift, which I highly recommend people get because it's free on her website. And she talks about this. Sit with the emotion and then try to offer a new stimulus. Try to offer a new option for that experience. And it was certainly life-changing for me. Now, and again, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for everyone, but I really encourage you to experiment with that process. Try to find something. The same thing Megan talked about was, what can we do instead? How else could we manage that emotion better in that state? And I really think Megan had some great insight here on trying to understand how to make that leap of faith into calorie tracking if you're not already doing it. You know, trying to understand that it's data. Now, it's data with a big picture. We are using this with still being who we are. And maybe you don't want to dive right into the calorie tracking. Maybe it's protein tracking, which feels a little less controlling. And as she had mentioned, some of the restriction is the accountability. Okay, well, let's make sure you're having enough of the good stuff. So make sure you're getting enough protein in each meal. You just track your protein sources. Okay, that's going pretty good after a little while. And then maybe you say, okay, well, how many grams of fiber would I be having? So then you want to track all of your fruits and vegetables and carb sources. And maybe you don't even track the protein at that point because you're already getting 30 to 40 grams per meal. So you're just tracking that. And then eventually, because once you're having enough protein, you're having enough fiber, I promise you're going to be pretty full from those meals. And that's really, as me and Megan talked about, why so many people have this issue or this experience of eating a whole food, high protein meal for the first time when they're so used to restricting, thinking there's no way I could lose weight on this. Well, that's the power of protein and fiber if you do it effectively. So it gives you a better picture in realizing how it all fits in. So I really encourage you, if you haven't evolved, to try to pick that evolution. And what Megan really lent great advice to is picking one thing to get ruthlessly good at. I really believe in the 80-20 principle, knowing what is going to be the biggest benefit for the best return, right? So the 80-20 Pareto's principle, look, and what are you willing to do? Because it's your journey. What are you willing to get comfortable with? I had a client who just, after months, she just never was comfortable with calorie tracking, but she did the protein and it made an impact for her. She got good at it. And that's what you, just get good at something rather than just kind of guessing. And this is data that can really help you get good at things. And eventually you can fit in the ice cream, the cookies, and all that, as she mentioned, daily. You know, I've been doing all these different challenges. I did this 60-day cookie eating every day in the midst of doing the candy challenge right now. And it's amazing when you actually hold accountability to it, to be like, hey, if I just have this much and I have it more frequently, the whole scarcity mindset disappears on these foods. And it's amazing and so much more fun to realize you can hit your health goals and not be scared of these foods and not feel like you have to binge on them, because it's that scarcity mindset of all or nothing that really takes hold of us. I was really glad to hear Megan talk about all these highlighting points. When I get mothers on here, I think it's so important that they speak to that audience and not me. I want to learn from that experience. I want to be able to help people who need that insight, and I won't be able to have it because you're going to do something way harder than I'll ever do my whole life. I always give all the credit I can. I can't understand it. I can't fully comprehend it. I just need to respect it. And Megan gave some great advice, doing something a little bit very similar to some other guests we had in the past. Maybe you just start with what she was talking about, TA activation, that you're breathing. When women go through pregnancy, they have that separation of their abdominal wall, so you can bring that in and you can work on some deep breathing and abdominal work even within your bed. And so that was Christy that mentioned that. And so trying to actually make sure you're bringing that abdominal wall in. You could literally be doing that on bed rest and then within the first few months. And just start with walking. The thing that's so important is choosing the thing that is just a bit awkward, but be ruthlessly consistent on. If it's a 10-minute walk every day, be ruthlessly consistent. And once you hit that, okay, I could do that for 30 days, add something else. Now, I do feel like everyone's going to be a bit different here. Sometimes people need more than one thing, maybe, and I would just argue, depending on the person you are, maybe it's one thing for training, one thing for nutrition. But make sure it's something that's going to make you feel like, again, a little bit awkward, but like it's a win to do. And that you're like, there's a 99% chance I'm going to do this. Maybe even a 90%, because it has to be a little bit awkward, right? And then in nutrition, okay, there's a little bit awkward, but I can do this one thing. And get that momentum, because that's also going to be a big part of feeling confidence in the process. And I want to come back to this and probably even finish with this thought. It's a trial and error. You're not going to be 100%. I promise you won't be 100%. If there's one thing I guarantee on every single fitness journey, 99.9% of the time, you're going to actually not succeed at something. You're going to have something not go as planned. As we already talked about with Megan, motherhood is definitely not something you can easily plan for. And again, I don't understand, but I can only imagine. And so anyone's fitness journey is always going to be a trial and error process. See everything as an experiment and trial and error. There is no effective failure. Failing is just giving up. Failing is saying, I am just not going to care if I'm a fit person. I just don't care if I ever achieve a good fitness status. I don't care if I ever eat healthy. That is failing, because you are literally giving up on attempting to do any health practices. Now, if you have a period in life where it's like, I'm not going to hit the gym for a couple weeks because I'm busy, I'm overstressed, that's not giving up. That is not what I'm really trying to orient around. I promise you I'm going to have that probably as a father growing up. I'm going to get too busy. I've been too busy for sure, and I need to put things aside. And I'm willing to bet that you have had or will have that in your life. But as long as internally you know you're not going to give up, it's like, hey, this is just for right now. I'm not giving up. That means it's trial and error. And so give yourself that permission and grace to know that, okay, right now is not perfect, but what can be good enough? And I heard a really good sentiment from, her name is Joelle Samantha on Instagram. She had this great idea of grace and grit. You need to give yourself grace for failure. You need to have grit to come back and do it again when it doesn't work. And knowing that, okay, this isn't going to be a perfect workout, but I'm going to do something for 10 minutes today. Okay, I'm going to miss workouts for a couple days. I'm too busy. I'm underslept. Okay, 3 days, I got to do something again. I'm still underslept, but I got to make sure I have some momentum. And this, I think, could go for, again, I try not to overreach and give mothers too much advice, but I think anyone who's having a hard time with their fitness long term, grace and grit. Grace to be willing to accept that errors are going to happen. You can't be perfect at a certain time in your life. And then grit to come back and attempt it again, attempt something. Because giving up is inherently the problem. It's not having a bad day. It's not even having bad weeks. It's the overall mindset and effort and willingness to say, when can I dust myself off and do it again? And the person who does that quicker, really think about this. The people who are the most successful are the best at getting back up. I had this quote back in the day. I only got good at push-ups because I got up so many times, pushing myself off the ground from attempting something. And that's just really more of a metaphor. I did a decent amount of push-ups, but I love that analogy of get good at push-ups mentally. Get good at getting back up as soon as you can. And I truly believe this, that yo-yo dieters are my favorite people to work with because they're the ones who keep coming back at it. And I don't mind hearing, oh, I've tried keto, I've tried this, I've tried that. I don't mind hearing that, because how many coaches have you heard, if you follow this podcast, say, oh yeah, I've tried a lot of things, and then they found something that's sustainable. It was their willingness to get back up again and again and again. And so have that willingness and say, basically what Jordan Sayed always says is, I can't fuck this up if I'm not going to give up, right? So give yourself that grace, have grit to continue, and you can find it on the other side. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, so don't hesitate to go check out Megan's information, especially if you are a mother or you're someone who's, dealing with emotional eating issues. I think she's got some great content. I was taking a look at it, and I really, really love her messaging, so please go take a look at it, and I will leave her information in the show notes, and she will certainly be on again in the future. Remember to please like, subscribe, and share this if you can. Leave a review, because it's the only way this thing is going to grow, so I really would greatly appreciate that. But no matter what, I appreciate you as a listener. Hey, you made it this far and you're listening to me rant, as these rants can tend to go pretty long. Try to keep this one a little short and sweet for you. And I just appreciate you giving your time, and there's a lot of podcasts out there, so thank you so much for listening, because I truly do just want to help you chase your own ambitions, because life is not about the pursuit of happiness, but rather the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.